Does Bitcoin trace its origins to the cypherpunk movement? Is it meant to be a tool that can free us from the tyranny of the man? Stick around as we uncover the surprising truth in this episode of The Centbee Show. Have you been hiding information from the government again, Kage? We all want to be invisible.
Yeah.
We all want to hide away and keep all our activities secret. But unfortunately, we live in a world where you've got to sometimes explain yourself to the man.
We need a world of transparency, don't you think?
Transparency builds trust. Crypto wants to create a world of secrets and mystery, opaqueness and encryption.
Yeah, hiding from the man.
We're not about hiding from the man, we're about exposing the man.
Straight up.
This is what Bitcoin is about, right?
Yeah.
Bringing all the secrets to light. Hello everybody, welcome to the Centbee Show. I'm your host Lorien Gamaroff, and my co-host is the man of mystery, Kage and Ntshingila. Kage, welcome to the show.
So, Michi.
Hey man, are you ready to expose the dark underbelly of crypto?
You know I'm ready, Miss G. I'm always ready for this. It's actually quite an exciting topic. I think this is going to be an awesome one.
It is. We did discuss a bit of cypherpunk ideology in the last episode 48, where we talked about BTC as a religion. So if you haven't seen that show, check it out. We just go into the idea of BTC and how the people who are supporting BTC and proponents of BTC really treat it very much like a religion.
Yeah.
Belief in something just through faith. But we did touch on the cypherpunk ideology, because a lot of Bitcoin today, the way people think about it, is that Bitcoin was meant to be a tool that can hide transactions, where people can be anonymous instead of pseudonymous. And a lot of that stems from this whole idea of being a cypherpunk. Now, there's a difference between cypherpunk and cyberpunk.
Yeah.
You know, the cyberpunk idea is we all are connected to computers and we communicate and we engage with people and we basically live our lives in the cyber world, you know, and I think nowadays most of us are kind of like that.
We all are. Yeah, this is the cyberpunk era for real.
Yes, I think everybody's born into being a cyberpunk these days.
Everything is connected these days, you know, even your TV, you know, so it's like, where are you if you're not connected?
Yeah. The difference really when you talk about cypherpunks and cyberpunks, of course, cyberpunks, we're all connected, we're all on computers and we're all in this digital world. But cypherpunk is slightly different, where instead of just being connected, it's about hiding your communications and making sure that nobody can track you when you are communicating or when you're transacting on the internet. And when it comes to Bitcoin, what happened was the cypherpunk mentality crept in quite early into Bitcoin because people thought it was all about hiding transactions and anonymous transactions. There was even the dark market websites and things, and people thought, well, Bitcoin is now that tool to be able to transact anonymously.
People are developing ideologies of having to be under the radar, away from the man. So, I mean, the creation of Bitcoin sort of seems like the perfect tool.
Cypherpunks forever have been trying to find a way to make payments anonymous. And there have been many different versions of cryptocurrency out there where people were trying to make them anonymous. And of course, those ones just didn't work there, or they got shut down. This idea that if you have an anonymous payment system and you can just transact freely without the man getting stuck in.
You just said there were other cryptocurrencies that were created before. So you're saying there were cryptocurrencies before Bitcoin?
Yes, of course. Bitcoin isn't the first one. There have been attempts for decades to try and create payments. Even interestingly, on the web, when you're working with HTTP, building websites, there's all these codes that you'll see when things go wrong. If there's a web page that you can't see, 403, 500 or whatever. But there is a code, an HTTP code that has never been used, and it's available for payments. I think it's 402.
I remember actually you mentioned this before, yes.
So since the advent of the internet, people have been trying to figure out how can we create a payment system. And of course, the cypherpunks, who we are going to now dive into, they said, well, the only way we want payments is if they are untraceable and they're anonymous. When Bitcoin arrived on the scene, people falsely thought that Bitcoin was that tool, a cypherpunk tool to be able to create transactions without anybody being able to trace them. People eventually realized, hang on, Bitcoin is not that tool, simply because of the fact that it is a traceable payment system. The blockchain is transparent, it's not encrypted, and that's one of the things about cipher. When we talk about cipher,
I wanted us to focus on that term because it is about encryption more than anything. And when we constantly mention BSV, we always mention that it's not encrypted. So there's a clear distinction there that some people overlook.
Yes, of course. Very clear.
Yeah.
So this is the thing. Bitcoin was kind of taken up by these people who have this ideology. And subsequently, they found out that Bitcoin is not an untraceable system. It's not encrypted. It's not a cipher system. So that's why we've had this whole advent of privacy coins, so-called privacy coins. Actual fact, they're anonymous coins or anonymity coins. And it's a very important distinction. You know, if you look at Monero and you look at Dash, Zcash, they are not privacy coins. Bitcoin actually is private, but it's not anonymous. This has now been this history of the crypto sphere since 2009 when Bitcoin emerged. Are people trying to take that idea and make it into a cypherpunk tool, making it more anonymous, making it untraceable, making it maximally decentralized, which is one of the religious tenets of the BTC community. That's all because Bitcoin was not a cypherpunk tool. In fact, it was the opposite of a cypherpunk tool, something that could bring to light transactions. It could expose fraud. It could expose money laundering. It could expose people transacting on that blockchain and make it impossible to make payments without any sort of traceability. That's what Bitcoin is. It's a tool to eliminate fraud, to eliminate anonymous transactions. Now, of course, when people say, well, I don't want everything I'm doing exposed to the government, that's why Bitcoin is a private system. You can be private by using Bitcoin. But if you need to expose that information, if the taxman wants to know, if you're being audited for whatever reason, if there's a regulator that thinks that it's important to know what you're doing, there's nothing you can do about it. You have to expose that information. And the cool thing is, though, this is the amazing thing about Bitcoin. Everybody wants Bitcoin to take over the world. Everybody wants to use Bitcoin. Everybody loves Bitcoin, and they want it to be accepted by governments and regulators. Now, how are you going to get something accepted by a regulator? Are you going to make it anonymous and untraceable?
Of course not.
You're going to make it pseudonymous and private.
Definitely.
And that's where Bitcoin fits. Bitcoin fails miserably to solve the cypherpunk problem of being free and independent and hidden away from the man.
So Ms. G, we have to take it where it all started. Who are the main key players, the guys who were involved, the guys who started all of this?
There were definitely some main figures, some of whom you'll know about, but there were guys who were involved in the crypto sphere, mathematicians and programmers. There was a particular guy called Eric Hughes, and he wrote the Cypherpunk Manifesto. He was very much trying to talk about how we can free ourselves from government in this digital age by using encryption and being able to secure information and that sort of thing. So he was quite prominent in that space, and back in the 90s, early 90s. And then there was somebody called Tim May. And he also wrote a manifesto, the Crypto Anarchist Manifesto. Same sort of thing. He was actually a physicist at Intel.
These guys that you're mentioning, they sound like people who were innovators in that space. They're not just social media influencers. These sound like well-learned people.
Absolutely,
So definitely there must be a reason why this was thought of, or for them to actually author these books.
It's not unusual to think like this. There are many educated people out there who have that ideology of being able to want to create a system that is free from government control. Governments don't make things better all the time. They often put rules and regulations in place that hinder innovation or stop people from being able to use services that could otherwise help them. And so it's not just, that kind of hacker mentality, somebody who wants to destroy things. No, this is a proper ideology. And also famously, somebody who you could also call a cypherpunk is Julian Assange. If you think about what his whole goal was to try and create a platform for whistleblowers to be able to publish information or expose information that the government's getting involved with. And because he felt like that's very important for people to know about. And to be honest, it is important to be transparent. Governments need to be transparent with the people too. And so this kind of ideology, it has some ground, some benefit. There's something sensible at first when you think about it. The idea that it's not good to have a tyrannical government stepping in and finding out everything you're doing and then manipulating it and manipulating you and controlling you. Nobody wants to be controlled.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these people, they don't want to destroy the system.
Yeah.
They want to make sure that governments don't have too much control over us. And with respect to Julian Assange, he felt that it was very important to be able to have a place where whistleblowers can bring information. Their identities are kept secret. And if there's payments to be made, then those should be also hidden away. WikiLeaks was a good example because early on in Bitcoin's history, WikiLeaks was very prominent. And the government in America decided to shut down funding for WikiLeaks.
Yeah.
So that meant WikiLeaks didn't get any donations. And normally they got donations through PayPal or Stripe or something like that. And so what happened with WikiLeaks was that the governments just said, well, no, these payment companies are not allowed to support WikiLeaks.
Yeah.
And so then WikiLeaks had all those payment services pooled and nobody could donate to WikiLeaks. And they were looking for a new way for people to be able to make payments that wasn't controlled by government. And that's when Bitcoin started being used to donate to WikiLeaks, falsely thinking that Bitcoin was a tool that was a cypherpunk payment tool. Same thing with all these drug dealing websites and dark market websites. And famously, Satoshi even said when people started donating to WikiLeaks that he doesn't want that to happen because Bitcoin was still new, it was still growing. And what we've found now over the last 15 years of Bitcoin's development is because of all this cypherpunk stuff, Bitcoin hasn't been able to develop and grow and be adopted widely in the way that we all hoped it would. Because it was always connected to these cypherpunks. Every time Bitcoin came up, it was either in association with WikiLeaks or a dark market or something like that.
It was tainted by default.
This is what Bitcoin has been trying to escape since the beginning, is this connection between dark markets and anonymous transactions and cypherpunks and all that. People are still learning about Bitcoin today, what it's good for and what it's not. But these were the people that were prominent in those days, back in Bitcoin's early arrival on the scene. And this is what made people excited about it. But of course, it wasn't that sort of tool. Julian Assange and all these guys on their dark market websites have found that Bitcoin is not a great tool for transacting anonymously.
Unfortunately, it's not.
Yes, but of course, there's a whole plethora of anonymous coins that people have decided to use instead. And when it comes to Bitcoin, and this is why BSV is so hated, you can say, in the crypto sphere, is because BSV is trying to bring about Satoshi's vision of a transparent and regulatory compliant payment system.
So, Ms. G, I mean, if we're taking it back, you spoke of Hughes, you spoke of May. Now we're speaking of Satoshi. Could we call him also a cypherpunk?
People do. They say often things like he published the Bitcoin white paper on a cypherpunk mailing list. And that's just an online mailing list or a bulletin board type thing. And people were posting cypherpunk stuff.
But did he?
No, he didn't.
That's not true. Yeah, because I'm in my head, I'm like, but that's not true.
Yes. If you read Satoshi's writings and you see what Bitcoin is, it was, as I said, the opposite of cypherpunk. And so it's actually false to say that Satoshi Nakamoto was a cypherpunk. And he published the Bitcoin white paper on the cypherpunk mailing list. But even if you do publish something on a list, it doesn't mean that it relates to that particular thing. If you go to a forum and the forum is called whatever, surfing waves, and you add something about a chocolate cake recipe, it doesn't mean that the chocolate cake recipe has got anything to do with surfing waves. It's just, you posted it on there. So this is the thing, that people have thought that Satoshi was a cypherpunk and he was engaging in the cypherpunk community. We have obviously subsequently found out more about Satoshi and realized that he is definitely anti these guys and not a friend of Julian Assange and somebody who is outspokenly trying to fight that whole ideology.
And he made it clear about his dislike in terms of how the protocol is being used. Because like you're saying, he wasn't trying to push the cypherpunk mentality. He was trying to build a protocol that fix existing issues in the transaction world. We've mentioned all these illicit websites where these guys were using Bitcoin, but what are the other examples where guys were just moving money?
Well, I mean, anything that people don't want to be traced in terms of payments. There's a lot of dark market websites out there, famously Silk Road.
Yeah.
And when articles are being written about Silk Road, it was the first time that people were exposed to this idea of Bitcoin. And it was always written about as this anonymous internet currency.
Yeah.
And so people were quite shocked by this whole idea of dark websites being able to offer anything, all this illegal stuff, and people paying for it with Bitcoin. If you look at torrent websites and that sort of thing, Pirate Bay, for example, they've got crypto addresses that you can donate to.
Yeah.
But the irony there is that those transactions are traceable. We hear about these dark markets getting shut down and the money's getting confiscated, the Bitcoins are being confiscated because those Bitcoin transactions are traceable. And what happens is when people want to cash out that Bitcoin that they've been earning through these illicit methods, they have to now go and take that Bitcoin to an exchange where they typically have to do KYC, submit identity information. And now those payments can be traced because as soon as money is received at an exchange for the person to trade it for local currency or swap it out into other cryptos, it's very possible now to go and trace where that money came from. And if you trace it to an address that's linked to Pirate Bay or WikiLeaks, then that money can be frozen. And of course, the way Bitcoin was created is that governments could confiscate money. If there's coins that are connected to some kind of crime, money laundering or something, through proof of work mining, it's possible to go to those miners with a court order and say, we want to freeze these coins and we also want to seize these coins. And so miners are compelled to be able to create a transaction that then sends those monies to law enforcement.
Mr. G, this is the truth that people need to know, because if you get your coin stolen or if something happens to your cash, you can't easily retrieve it like that.
That's right. That's what creates trust. If you want to feel confident using a system like Bitcoin, you want to make sure that if money gets stolen or lost, that you can get it back.
Yeah.
And you want to know that if a taxman comes to you and says, right, tell me what you've been doing, you've got the ability to show him that information. And that's how we end up with a world that people want to engage in. When things are dark and hidden and encrypted and cipher, it doesn't make you feel safe.
Not at all.
It almost paints a target on your back.
Yeah.
Because now you're doing something illegal and you're going to have to hide.
Yeah.
It's very important that Bitcoin wasn't meant to be a tool that was for people to do illicit activities. It was a tool that could expose those illicit activities, thereby giving merchants and regulators confidence in that system.
So with that being said, I guess a lot of people found out after illicit activities and stuff that, geez, actually this is traceable.
Yeah, there's been plenty of coins seized. In America, there's still the Silk Road coins that the American government is now holding and selling. And other governments have seized large amounts of crypto and BTC from criminals. And they're sitting with these huge piles. And obviously the BTC crowd are terrified that that's all going to get dumped.
Yeah.
But I guess if you vote for Donald Trump, he's not going to sell it.
It's going to be pumping your bags. Check out the app on the stores. Also remember to subscribe. Hook up your friends, man. This is the real BSV plug. Move money on fire, yo. So now we need to understand, why is Bitcoin like a bad cypherpunk tool?
Yeah, so let's go through the aspects of Bitcoin that make it really bad for hiding money and for transacting anonymously.
Yeah.
So first of all, we have what's called the public ledger. This is the blockchain. And the blockchain just consists of little groups of transactions, and we call those groups blocks. And every few minutes, a new block is created of transactions, every 10 minutes or so. Now, the thing about the blockchain is that every one of those transactions are recorded transparently. In other words, you can see, where's that money going, how much is it, and what time was it sent. But more than that, you can also trace back all those transactions to the beginning of time. So if you see a transaction and there's coins that have been paid to somebody, you can now go and see, where did those coins come from? And all that information is publicly available on the blockchain. Anybody can download the blockchain and can view that information. Now, what makes it private is that it's pseudonymous. And pseudonymous means we can see addresses in those transactions, because when you make a Bitcoin payment, you send money to an address. Now you can see that address, but you don't know who that address belongs to necessarily. Obviously, if you've sent those coins and somebody said, here's my Bitcoin address, then you'll know. But if you just go and download the Bitcoin blockchain public ledger, you are going to see millions of transactions and you're not going to know who is what. But this is great for regulators because if you are an accountable institution or just anybody and you're transacting in Bitcoin and the regulator comes to you or the auditor comes to you or the taxman comes to you and says, right, show me your transactions, you can then go to that blockchain ledger and you can give them the addresses of all the transactions that you've received. And then the auditor or the taxman will be able to confirm that information because they can then download that public ledger too. This is the whole point of it being public, is that everybody can access that information. So straight off the bat, that is very bad for cypherpunks because cypherpunks are not going to want to have a public ledger where if you pay them, then that transaction is now visible on the network. And if law enforcement can discover that money is going through to that address and it's illicit funding, they can then eventually track and find that person. So just the nature of this public ledger makes it very bad as an anonymous tool.
Yeah, I mean, public ledger, cypherpunk, those are like an oxymoron.
Exactly. They don't go well together. But of course, now that means that anonymous coins like Monero and Zcash have been developed. They are trying very hard to make sure that the ledger is not a public ledger. And then, of course, when it comes to the public ledger, that makes it regulatory compliant.
Yes.
Because now transactions are traceable. And of course, if you want to be regulatory compliant, in other words, if you want governments to say, yes, that's fine, you're not shirking any of the rules, you're not skirting around any of the compliance rules, then by that transaction being traceable, means that it complies with rules around payments. That's a very important rule. And then, this is the one that everybody always talks about with Bitcoin. There's even a conference called the Unconfiscatable Conference. But one of the words that you are always going to hear about Bitcoin, which doesn't apply, and it's always misapplied, is censorship resistance. In other words, if I want to pay somebody, nobody can stop me. This is why WikiLeaks was using it in the early days, because they had PayPal blocked, they had Stripe blocked, they had credit cards blocked. They couldn't accept any payments.
Any form of payment,
Which meant that they were being censored. That's what it means to be censorship resistant, is that if the government wants to censor you, it wants to shut you down, it wants to shut you up and make it impossible for you to be able to do anything. So this false narrative that crept into Bitcoin was that it was censorship resistant. If you wanted to, you could pay anybody in the world and nobody can stop you. Now, of course, yes, it is possible to create a transaction if you've got an address and to make a payment to that address. But the fact that the Bitcoin transaction is traceable and whoever is receiving that transaction eventually is going to have to be accountable somewhere along the line, it means that it's not censorship resistant. It is possible for governments to blacklist addresses and say anybody who receives money on these addresses is going to be blacklisted, which means you can't go and send that to an exchange. You can't do any commerce with that. Those coins are tainted. And so this is a very important thing about Bitcoin, is that it was not ever intended to be censorship resistant. If you are making payments on the Bitcoin ledger, those payments are transparent. And if you are paying to an address that has been linked to a criminal organization or something, then the miners are going to be forced to freeze those funds and to not process those transactions. That's really what it means when we say freezing of funds. You can't move the money off the address because it's been flagged by law enforcement. And this goes back to the whole mining operation when it comes to proof of work, is the miners are incentivized not to process illicit transactions, because if they do process those illicit transactions, they're going to get shut down and they're going to lose all that money, all that investment into all that infrastructure, those mining nodes, the staff, the building, the electricity, everything that they've invested in. If they go and process that illicit transaction, they're going to get shut down and they're going to lose all that funding. This is what speaks to the honesty of the Bitcoin system. Bitcoin is a system built on honesty and economically incentivized through honesty. If you are dishonest, you are going to lose money. If you're honest, you're going to make money. That is the core of the security of Bitcoin, which is quite amazing and quite wonderful at the same time.
It is, especially at this day and age, Mr. G. We hardly hear honesty being the thing that's pushed forth. So it's actually quite awesome to know that, we are supporting a protocol that's promoting honesty. So yeah, guys, just remember to download the app and plug your friends, Mobile Money on Fire. You know, when we speak of BTC, we also have to mention Lightning. And, well, to my understanding, I thought when Lightning was created, it was to make their transactions cheaper.
Yeah.
But it seems like it's adding a complication on top of that. Now, transactions are not as traceable as they should be. What's that all about?
The whole idea of BTC is a traceable ledger.
Yeah.
But what they are trying to do is reduce the costs of transactions, because the biggest issue in BTC really, how much it costs to move Bitcoin.
Yeah.
You know, it costs dollars. Of course, if you have a system that is expensive to use, nobody's going to use it.
Yeah.
Even if you do believe in the whole hodl mentality. Now, Lightning was introduced as a way to be able to reduce the costs of those transactions. And essentially what it does, and they call it a second layer on the Bitcoin network, but that's technically not correct. It's an alternative network, separate from Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Instead of being integrated into Bitcoin as a layer, it's a separate thing outside of Bitcoin. And the way it works is that when you want to make a transaction, what you do is, instead of just me making a transaction to you, the way Bitcoin was intended, what it does is that it basically moves those transactions into a separate network. And that network is a mesh network. When you are making transactions through that network, there are hops. So let's say I want to move a Bitcoin to you. What I will do is I will then move that Bitcoin, at least not move it, but it will be recorded on the Lightning network.
Yeah.
And then that coin will be sent to one person, another person, another person, another person, until it eventually finds you on this network. And then once it's found you, it'll then be settled onto the Bitcoin blockchain.
But, sorry, Ms. G, that doesn't sound cheap in any way, because it sounds like with every bounce, there has to be a fee to it.
Yes, there is a fee, although they say that it's a marginal fee. The real cost comes in actually funding a channel, they call it, because that's a Bitcoin transaction. And then when you want to cash out, you have to then make another Bitcoin transaction, a BTC transaction. So at the end of the day, you're kind of paying twice.
This is crazy.
But the effect of having a Lightning network means that the traceability is broken down, because now there is no way for us to go and find where did that money come from, and then where did it go? Because essentially what is happening is the transaction is going into this alternative network and then bouncing around in all ways through all sorts of people. There's no record of who these people are, and then ultimately settle back into your wallet. And now we have no traceability on Bitcoin. And so Lightning has now, in effect, made Bitcoin more anonymous, because you can't get traceability out of the network. And this is a very important issue when it comes to regulatory compliance. We've said so many times that Bitcoin was built to be regulatory compliant. It wasn't meant to skirt around any laws. It was meant to enforce the rules around payments so that governments and regulators could be happy with it. But now Lightning is an entirely new network that obfuscates or hides the transaction, the coins moving from one person to another.
So you're saying essentially that BTC transaction is now off the ledger?
Yes, it's all that those transactions are now off the chain. And there is no way to download that information and get a perfectly traceable trail where the coins came from and where they're going to. Without that, no regulator can be ever happy with the system.
I mean, even now, Mr. G, with the current system, you'd have to declare where you got your money. Like, you can't just wake up with $1 million in your account.
Yes, where did it come from? Show me the trail of how that money got to your account. If you say, sorry, decentralized, you're gonna...
That's when they confiscate it.
That's when you end up in jail. And this is what has happened. There have been many guys who thought that they could get away with using Bitcoin as an anonymous system, and now they're in jail, and their coins are sitting in government vaults somewhere. So yes, Lightning Network, of course, it still hasn't been proven, and it still is a network that's in development. People are using it for tests, but it's not production ready. And of course, there are issues around that'll make sure that it never is production ready. And that's really comes down to network theory. But the idea of breaking the traceability of transactions, that is cypherpunk, something that, again, no regulator is ever going to tolerate. If you can't show where your money came from, then that's illegal money, and you're going to be busted for that.
That's a no-brainer, actually, Mr. G, because with the current system, you can't just live off money that you didn't declare.
And again, this speaks to Satoshi's design. He made it so that it complied with the rules of traceability. But of course, Lightning Network and all these other implementations, all they're trying to do is break the traceability. They're trying to break Bitcoin, trying to make it not acceptable in commerce and in industry and to be accepted and tolerated by regulators.
Yeah.
There's a lot of naive people out there really believing in this ideal of a cypherpunk network, but unfortunately are going to be disappointed.
Yeah. So yeah, Ms. G, I think we've actually clarified that Bitcoin is not a cypherpunk tool. And another way I see it, it includes everyone, because we always speak of these microtransactions, like you want to pay a car guard or just money moving fast. In fact, the white paper states that it's peer-to-peer cash.
Yes.
I think it's more on that.
Absolutely. This whole idea of Bitcoin being valuable if it is censorship resistant or if it's anonymous, this is what people in BTC and in crypto keep on talking about. They're saying the only value that we can get out of the system is if it's censorship resistant and resistant to the man. And it can provide a way for us to transact in a censorship resistant way, where if I want to donate to WikiLeaks, nobody can stop me.
Yeah.
This is what drives really the foundational ideology of crypto, is making sure that it is maximally decentralized. But of course, that's never going to cater to the world. The vast majority of people on Earth, they don't want a tool that is encrypted and secret and potentially could get them in trouble. Satoshi Nakamoto created a system that was scalable, it was cheap, it could cater to the lowest LSM, the person who wants to spend a few cents on something, small casual transactions. Of course, Bitcoin is even more than that. It can enable nano transactions, tiny transactions, and that can enable all sorts of interesting new business models in terms of how the web works, how internet works, how content can be monetized. Also, maybe the Internet of Things, devices can pay each other. And so this is what Satoshi Nakamoto wanted. He wanted a system that could be used by everybody, not just an elite bunch of coders or cypherpunks or people with lots of money. He wanted it to be something that could be used by the common person in the street. And this is really what Centbee's whole goal is to try and make a wallet that can be used for simple, casual, day-to-day transactions, especially in emerging markets where people don't necessarily have credit cards or anything like that. Mobile money is taking over the world, and everybody's transacting on their mobile phones. And Bitcoin SV, Satoshi's vision for Bitcoin, is the only blockchain that can cater to that. So by moving away, at least distancing itself from this idea of cypherpunks, it means that now everybody can jump into Bitcoin SV and start using it, and empowering people, and specifically reducing the costs of transactions, which is such a burden on the vast majority of people in the world. There are people out there who need to make payments and really struggle to cover those fees. And of course, there are systems and banks and everybody's trying to reduce the costs of transactions, but nobody has done it like Satoshi Nakamoto has done it with Bitcoin SV. The incredibly low costs of transactions, the number of transactions that can be processed per second. We've often spoken about the innovations happening on BSV like Terranode, which can cater to millions of transactions per second, way more than all the blockchains combined. So this is what we want. We want this world that can empower millions, not just hide money for the elite. That's not what Satoshi was going for. We encourage you to go look at Bitcoin Satoshi Vision or BSV and think about it in terms of payments, legitimate, regulatory compliant payments, because that's where the great value for Bitcoin lies, not in hiding money or hodling money and hoping that you'll get rich. If you listen to any of these crypto pundits out there talking about $1 million Bitcoins, unfortunately, that's just a vain hope. It's something that is completely unattainable and makes no economic sense. It's just that when you get bitten by the Bitcoin bug and you think that here finally is a way for you to make it without doing any hard work, you're going to be disappointed. In the same way WikiLeaks was disappointed and Silk Road was disappointed when they found out that Bitcoin was not this anonymous, censorship-resistant blockchain. Satoshi didn't want that. We don't want that. We want to help the world, and the only way we can do that is with Bitcoin SV.
True story, yo. So yeah, Ms. G, stepping into this week's user questions and feedback. First one comes from BSV Godfather. Such a cool name. He says, I love the intro music. Did you make it? I wish we did. But yeah, that's our soundtrack, yo. Pretty cool. It was outsourced, actually. Thanks, BSV Godfather. So yeah, our second one comes from SpeedKeys22. He's saying, I'm really starting to like your show.
That's really great. Thanks for really starting to like the show. We have a goal, and that is to explain what Satoshi Nakamoto wanted in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Because we want to see a Bitcoin world.
Yeah.
Right now we're seeing a crypto world. And it seems that crypto is going to be here until it all crashes in a fire and burns. But we're hoping that we can at least expose the reality of what Bitcoin is and Satoshi's vision for Bitcoin, so that more of you can figure it out and jump on this and be involved in this great technology that is so transformational. So we're very happy that you like the show. Thanks so much for the comment.
Thanks, because I think our show is one of those slow burners. Like, it easily grows on you, you know. It's not one of those where you just quickly jump in and then it's like gradually over time, you know, because I guess it's also one of those where you get to learn a lot.
Yes.
So it's
we're learning a lot.
Diff.
You know, we're learning a lot about how to make a YouTube video, how to make a podcast.
Yeah.
We're getting better.
We are. As long as guys are digging our stuff, it means there's an impact we're making.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool. So thanks, Speed Kiss. We appreciate it. Thanks for the shout out.
Our third one comes from Circus Road. They're saying, here from Winnipeg, Manito BSV.
Nice, Winnipeg. Thanks, Circus Road from Winnipeg. Shout out to Canadians who are watching the show. We actually have quite a few Canadians who watch the show. And we appreciate you guys. Spread the news of BSV and spread the news of Centbee Show. We appreciate it. And keep watching the show. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Circus Road. Yeah, our last one comes from David Streets. And he's saying, hello, love the show.
Yes, love the show. Thank you. We love you. Thanks for the comment.
Yeah, I think that's actually our last one.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice, Kage. Thanks for this show about cypherpunks.
Thank you, Mr.
It was good to talk about cypherpunks properly.
Yeah.
It is a great false narrative that has crept into Bitcoin and really tainted this whole idea of Bitcoin and what its goals are and what Satoshi intended for it. Satoshi wasn't a cypherpunk. He was anti-cypherpunk. He wants to bring everything to the light.
Yeah.
He wanted transparency. He wanted to expose things. He wanted to make sure that money launderers and drug dealers and terrorist finances couldn't make use of anonymous transactions. And that's why he created Bitcoin SV. We're glad that we got to talk about it today and we got to iron out this false narrative. Keep watching the show. We really appreciate all your comments, and our subscriber count is growing. We're getting close to that magic number, 1,000 subs, and on YouTube. Of course, we do post on Rumble, and we're going to be posting on TikTok, and we've got a couple social platforms that we're out there. So if YouTube isn't the best way to consume the Centbee Show, then you can go to those other channels. Keep liking what we're doing, and we're going to keep making these videos. We want to thank you guys from watching the Centbee Show. Please come back soon.
Bam.
Booyah.
It's a wrap.